What's going on, YouTube? Welcome back to another Heart Over Height episode. Today, we're going to be discussing the top 10 players with the most pressure and where they rank and everything like that. So if you do enjoy this content, do me a huge favor. Smash the like button, subscribe to the YouTube channel, comment down below on what you think. Who's got the most pressure? Who's got the least? So without further ado, let's get right on into this. So I'm going to be pulling 10 players off of this bit of 50 right here. And I'm just going to be grabbing them and then putting them, 1 being the least pressure, 10 being the most pressure. Now, you might see some guys, a couple guys in like 6, 7, a couple guys also just in 1, and then nothing in like 3, for example. So not every spot may not be filled. I'll try my best, of course, but I just think that I chose 10 players that have a lot of pressure. So you're going to see more higher numbers than the lower numbers. Because, we don't want to talk about, for instance, like Derek White, where there's no pressure there. Someone like that, there's zero pressure for him. So you might as well talk about those guys with the most pressure. And speaking of most pressure, let's get it off. I think that there's a lot of pressure on this guy, Jimmy Butler. I think Jimmy Butler's pressure is around a 9 itself because it's his contract year, right? So he has to perform. Miami's not going to want to give him money if he goes out this year and just doesn't play in the regular season like normally. He, kind of has a dud and they don't succeed in the playoffs a little bit. They might be looking to move off of him at that point, not giving him a massive contract. So Jimmy Butler, I believe there is a lot of pressure. Now, I do think that he'll handle that pressure just fine. I think that he's the kind of player that he'll go in and he's going to play a lot of games. He's going to put up great numbers. He'll be an all-star this year. He'll be all-NBA caliber player this year. I think that we're going to see the old Jimmy Butler this year so he can secure one last bag before he eventually retires. Next up on this list, I have a guy who I've talked about many times on this channel. It is Lamelo Ball. I think that if I'm the Hornets, there's some pressure here. And if I'm LaMelo, there's some pressure. I'm going to put it around a 7, of course, with Hornets still being in the rebuild mode and everything. But LaMelo specifically has got to start having healthier seasons. I mean, if I am an organization and my superstar is twisting his ankle every other game, I don't want my guy to be doing that. It's no disrespect to him, of course. It's more of, hey, we want a guy that is everyone's favorite player wants to be on the court. We need a guy that everyone is going to buy tickets for so that they can watch him play, not see, oh, he's out for half the season. All right, well, we're not going to half the games kind of thing. So I do believe there is some pressure on LaMelo to perform. I've said it before, if he has another unhealthy season, then Hornets need to seriously think about moving off of him. Next up, I do have the Greek Freak. I think that there's a lot of pressure here. He might be. I think that there's one other guy here. I'm going to save number 10 for just one singular player. I'm going to put him at a 9. I think that the Bucks are in a situation where they've gone all in, right? So the pressure's already high. You traded a lot for Dame. You got rid of Drew Holiday. Drew Holiday then went on to the championship roster. So there's some pressure here to compete. Definitely. Your players are getting older around you. They're very injury prone. You got to put something together, Giannis. You got to have a dominant season if you want this roster to contend one last time, or you're going to be going into a rebuild mode. You're going to be scrapping Chris Middleton, Brook Lopez are for sure going to be out the door. And then that's if they don't succeed this year. And then you might consider a moving off of Dame, because if this year the Dame-Giannis thing doesn't work, because then you'd have 2 seasons with Dame and Giannis. So there is some pressure definitely there on him. Next up, I've talked about this as well. Trey Young, there's some pressure here. I'd say he's about an 8. Not necessarily to succeed and win a championship, but there's some pressure here for him to perform and for him to showcase that he didn't necessarily need a superstar next to him, that the Hawks don't need to move off of him. In my personal opinion, if I'm the Hawks GM, I'm moving off of him. I think that Trey Young has showcased, yes, he's only 25, but he's showcased enough to where defensively he's a liability against these championship rosters. I understand his defense has improved, but against championship rosters, they're going to pick him and put him in an action every single time. If not, then they're going to be going up against guys like better defenders, Jalen Johnson, Clint Capella, stuff like that. So if I am like the Celtics, for example, I'm going to be trying to put Trey Young, who's 6 foot, in an action on Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, rather than putting Jalen Johnson, DeAndre Hunter, someone like that in an action, of course. So with them, they also had the number 1 overall pick. They got Ricochet. Like, they have the opportunity here. They have Dyson Daniels. They have Jalen Johnson. So it is going younger. So that means that there's pressure on Trey Young. If he don't want to be bounced out of Atlanta, then he's got to perform and showcase that they don't necessarily need to rebuild, just retool. Next up on this list, I do have a guy. He's got to stay healthy, similar to a Lamelo Ball class. I think that he has a little more pressure, though. I think he's around an 8 on the pressure scale. This being Kawhi Leonard. I think Kawhi has got to perform this year. I think he's got to showcase that he's not just some injury-prone player, that he can carry a roster similar to the way he did the Raptors. Now, I'm not saying go all the way to the championship again, but what I'm saying is you have a new arena. You lost Paul George. They paid James Harden. There's not too much else around you. What can you do with this roster, Kawhi? It's similar to, like, the way I like to describe what seems like going on with the Clippers is the Cowboys, for example, the Dallas Cowboys. We'll switch over to football for just a second as this analogy kind of works. Dallas has decided not to really bring in decent receivers for Dak Prescott on a contract year. So if Dak has a down year, they don't necessarily need to pay that dude all the money in the world to keep him on the roster. If he has a down year with poor receivers, his argument is going to be, well, I had poor receivers. Their argument is going to be a great quarterback is going to make receivers great, so we'll pay you great money if you make them good. Same thing with the Clippers. They want to see before they move off of Kawhi, can you do something with this roster? Can you do anything? Can you make the playoffs? Right? I think you need a deep run. I think this is the last year of the Clippers Kawhi Leonard era anyways, but if you're the Clippers, I'm looking to move off the guy. Go salvage some trade capital, some draft capital, and retool because you've given up so many first-round picks to acquire Paul George. So you need to retool that a little bit to absorb some back. Next up here, I have a guy who I think a lot of people are seeing that there's a ton of pressure on. It is Joel Embiid. I think he's got the most pressure of any player this year. I think it's because you have Tyrese Maxey, who is going to play games. You have Paul George, who's a perfect fit alongside Maxey and Embiid. And then, of course, you have Embiid. Embiid, time and time again, has had serviceable rosters to compete for a championship and just hasn't. So at some point, you either got to succeed or you're going to be put into the category that you're just a great regular season player because you can't perform in the playoffs. He can have individual good games, but he's always getting injured. And of course, that injury is just expected now. It's like, okay, when is it going to happen? I understand you have an MVP season, but there's still a ton of pressure to perform in the playoffs because you haven't succeeded in the playoffs. You have not been to a finals yet with rosters that included Jimmy Butler, Ben Simmons, who is an all-NBA defender, Tobias Harris, who was serviceable on the roster, JJ Redick, who was a sniper. You couldn't do it with Tyrese Maxey and other serviceable players on the roster. There have been time and time again where they haven't been in rebuild mode. The idea of trust the process, that has been Embiid, the process. They went through so much rebuild and so much terror of years to get a guy like Embiid to then do nothing with it. That's what I'm saying. That's why there's a ton of pressure here on Joel Embiid for him to perform as he's got to put on a show and win playoff games. I don't give a damn if they end up being the 6th seed and winning throughout the playoffs. Like, if that's what it takes to get you guys to win in the playoffs, to save Embiid, maybe you have to drop a little bit in those standings, then that's what you got to do. But Embiid cannot be throwing up donuts in playoff games. Just poor games. He should be the best player on the court, especially winning an MVP. Most valuable player. You should be the most valuable player on the court. And you're not. You're getting outperformed. When you're not on the court, Tyrese Maxey dropped 50. So this is what I'm talking about. Embiid definitely has the most pressure of any player here. Next up here, we have an interesting guy. This one, some people might not agree with necessarily. It is Brandon Ingram. Brandon Ingram, I think that there is some pressure here just as to where is he going to fit. That's where the pressure, I would say it's more around 5, but the pressure here is where is he going to fit next season? It seems like he's the odd man out in New Orleans. I thought heavily maybe of putting Zion here instead of Brandon Ingram or including both of them. But right now, I think the pressure's all on Brandon Ingram because he is someone that the roster doesn't seem to need him. You know, we're going to go through and talk about one other player that fits that mold, but Brandon Ingram himself is not performing to the level or the need that the Pelicans need. He's seeking $45 to $50 million contract per year. That's like an insane amount of money for a guy that doesn't fit the roster. If I'm the Pelicans, I'm not paying that. When you have Trey Murphy and Herb Jones sitting on the bench waiting for their turn. Jordan Hawkins, who's losing minutes to guys like Brandon Ingram, who isn't helping you win playoff games. That is why Brandon Ingram has a lot of pressure. I know it's only a 5, but it's because he is a solid player. He really is. I'd like to see, honestly, the more and more that I see that Toronto trade, yes, I think the Pelicans are giving up quite a lot, but the idea of Brandon Ingram on Toronto, I like that a lot because he can go and just play basketball and there's no pressure. If he goes to a more not so great team, Chicago, for example, Chicago, Toronto, Brooklyn, he goes to, in the West, San Antonio, where there's no pressure to necessarily win right now, I think that's the best case scenario for him to revive what he can do on the court. Because we all know he's a really good player. It's just, can you win? Can you prove that you can elevate a roster instead of, honestly, being a little bit of an anchor? Next up here, we have a guy I think that there's a lot of pressure on. It is Klay Thompson. Klay, you decided you didn't want a contract with the Warriors anymore. You did not want to finish out your career with the Warriors, and that's fine. But now you don't have your other splash brother right next to you. Yes, you're going and joining the Western Finals team. Sure. But what can you do on that roster? A lot of people have been saying you're not the same player you once were. Can you prove those guys wrong? And hopefully this isn't one of those situations where it's Jordan that when he went to the Wizards. It's, those Allen Iverson at the end of his career bouncing around a little bit. Vince Carter when he played for the Kings. Like players that we forget that they were in another jersey because they just didn't perform. They wish that D Wade when he was on the Bulls. You wish that you could forget those years because he's a lifer with the one team, the Heat, for example, or Klay Thompson, the Warriors. So I hope for Klay, he goes out and he balls out and it was the right decision. He decided not to go to LA. He decided to go play with the Mavericks because he thought it was a better fit and a better option for him. I respect that decision because I do agree. I think it's a better fit being with Kyrie and Luka. You are known as a 3-and-D kind of guy. Has that defense left the building since you got injured? Can you pick up the slack that the Mavericks need in, let's say, Derrick Jones Jr. walked out the door. Can you pick up his slack? Can you be some sort of formidable offense for them as Luka and Kyrie are getting doubled? Now, I understand the idea behind Klay Thompson fits perfectly with Dallas. It's just, will he perform and be Klay that we know or this Klay that we had last year? Next up here, I got a guy that fits that Brandon Ingram mold where he's getting lost on the roster. This is the kind of guy that he is just they brought in some players, and that's Julius Randle. Julius Randle is being lost in the sauce right now. I think the pressure is around a 6 for him because I think really quick, if they don't fit, if those guys don't fit with Randle, Randle's out the door. They've got a solid core there, and if Randle fits, great. If not, trade deadline. He will be traded. It's, you have Brunson, DiVincenzo, Mikal Bridges, OG. That's 1 through 4 right there. And then you have Mitchell Robinson right there. Precious Achiuwa coming off the bench. Josh Hart coming off the bench. You don't need Julius Randle. Julius Randle can just be a benefit. That is if Julius Randle can learn to adapt his game to play with these guys. Not let me get mine, you guys can get yours. Because his career has been let me get mine. The value of his trade, I don't know how that would look and everything, but I could see New York quickly moving off of him, just saying, hey, he's not working with the rest of us, and the rest of us, when he was injured, made it a deep playoff run. Yes, we had some injuries here, but we did it without him. We don't need him. Last but not least, the last guy that has a decent amount of pressure on him, and it hurts me to do this because I'm a Celtics fan, but it is Jason Tatum. Tatum's pressure is honestly probably an 8 just to, in this next playoff series that he has, he's got to perform. We can't have these games where he has like 20% from 3, 25% from the field or 30% from the field. He's got to be the guy. If he wants to be the guy in Boston, cool. But Jaylen Brown's knocking at the door. If you want to, he does all these, like the praising Kobe and everything like that. If he wants to be at the level of Kobe Bryant, then yeah, he has got to perform in the playoffs. Kobe always performed. Now, what I will say and why it's not a 9 or a 10 is because LeBron in his first 2 playoff seasons also did not perform well. So that alleviates a little bit of pressure for Jason Tatum. But I will say there's still a lot of pressure, just as there was a lot of pressure on LeBron playoff year 3 to perform. And then he did. So Jason Tatum, this is a crucial year in the playoffs for y'all. We all know during the regular season he's going to go do his thing. But when the lights are at their brightest, are you going to be available to step up, take the game-winning shot? To fourth quarter, 6 minutes to go, you're down 10. Are you going to be able to string something together where you just take over? I think he's got it. The thing is, too, with him, he needs to learn how to attack the basket more. He is 6'8", and he'll have a small guard on him, and he'll step back 3, or he'll have a big man on him, and he'll step back 3. It's like, why are you not driving? Go attack him in the paint. Get fouled. Get the easy points at the line. Gain the confidence to then knock down the 3-point shot. So, yeah, I do believe that there's a decent amount of pressure. Now, of course, there were some other guys I thought about putting on this list here. DeMar DeRozan being one. I think, yes, he's towards the end of his career and everything like that, but you go over to a new team there's some expectation for them to perform, to go out and try and win serviceable playoff games. Another guy is, there's obviously pressure on LeBron, AD, because it's LeBron. There's going to always be pressure. Can you string together one last championship run? And does that change the GOAT conversation? Another guy was possibly Donovan Mitchell. Donovan Mitchell you need to keep up with the rest of the guys in the East. Can you? And then, like I said before, Zion Williamson, because similar to Brandon Ingram, we got to start seeing playoff success. So overall, a lot of these guys, it's about injury history, contract year, or you got to start performing. So if you guys did enjoy this video, do me a huge favor, smash the like button, subscribe to the YouTube channel, comment down below on whether or not you agree or disagree with some of these players. Let me know in the comments. So guys, with that being said, it's been another Heart Over Height episode, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.